Hey folks! So if you follow us on Twitter and Instagram, you've seen some pictures of our miniatures. And today I want to talk you through the process of how I take those pictures. So if you want to share your work, not only is it important that you know how to paint your minis and you put the time and patience into painting your minis, but also that you know how to take photos of it and you put a little bit of time and effort into it because you want to capture what your mini actually looks like, what it looks like on the table, pick up on all those details that you have put all that time and effort into painting. So let's start off with the background. When I first started taking pictures of our minis, I used just a plain white sheet of paper, or I would use black construction paper as the background. But now I have gone ahead and made a little bit of an additional investment, and I picked up this scrapbooking paper and a couple of different, I've got like a brown that's nice for kind of dirt, marble, grass, and a like water background. And these were just like $1 or $2 from a local craft store. Not a whole lot of investment. I will say that the brown and the marble is probably the best investment, and I'd love to find kind of a black marble just to have a nice black background that has a little bit of interest to it beyond just a plain black piece of construction paper. And the key to setting up your backgrounds is I use a little bit of sticky tack and I attach one end of the background paper to the surface that I'm going to be setting my mini on, and then I sticky tack the other end of it to the wall so that it creates a bit of a curve so you don't have that right angle edge. And this creates like a mini cyclotron, so those kind of white curved backdrops that they'll do like movies and ads and stuff like in front of. So that creates that for your mini so you don't have that horizon line in the picture. The second thing you want to consider is lighting. It's very important for photos that you have good light. That's what photos are, capturing the light. I have 2 lights that I use for filming, and I also use these for miniatures because these lights I can adjust the brightness as well as the temperature, whether it's a white or a yellower. I tend to use the white light on it just because that doesn't mess up with the colors of the paints. It really lets the actual colors of the paint shine. But before I had these, I just used table lamps. I had a couple and I would just set them up, trying to make sure that I had at least 2 different light sources to try and minimize those shadows. And if you are using table lamps, I highly suggest making sure that you have the daylight light bulbs in there. They just give a much wider spectrum, more truer color light. So like the old incandescent lights tended to be a lot more of the warmer tone, and you want to make sure you stay away from that because it's not going to accurately represent the colors you have painted on the miniature. Alright, camera. I use a EOS Rebel T6i Canon camera with the kit lens. Use whatever camera you have. You can even use the camera on your phone. I'm going to be kind of gearing a little bit more towards using the actual camera. So get to know your camera a little bit, figure out what settings work best on your camera. For me, I usually shoot on the macro setting, and then I'll make adjustments from there. And I also usually shoot with manual focus rather than autofocus, so that autofocus, sometimes it'll want to focus on the background and not on the miniature. And also that allows me to decide, do I want to focus on the miniature's face, or do I want to focus on, like if it's in a bit of a more like action pose, I can have it focus on like the sword in the front that might have some really cool detail. Or I can focus back on the face, and that gives a nice depth of focus to the picture and makes it a little bit more active. And obviously play around with your camera settings to make sure that you're taking you're not over or underexposing it, and also that the white balance is appropriate for whatever lighting you're using. One very important thing is making sure your camera is stable. I tend to actually just set my camera on the desk that I'm shooting on. That puts it kind of at eye level with the minis, I guess you could say. But also for larger minis, or depending on if I want to get a different angle, I will use a tripod. The reason I do this is just holding the camera by hand, it's very difficult to hold it absolutely still. And because you're shooting such a small, close-up thing, that little bit of shake is going to create blurs in the photos, and you're not going to be able to capture those fine details. Since I have the kit lens, I don't have a macro lens yet. That's something I'd like to invest in, and if you want to go support us on Patreon, that's something we could add to our wish list. Bing. So I'll put my camera as close to the Mini as I can get it within the focal range, and then I'll usually focus down in on the Mini as close as I can get. Also, this is something that you can do in the editing if you realize, oh, I really want to, you can crop it a little on the wide side, and then in editing, just crop it in exactly to the dimensions that you want. One additional thing, I oftentimes like to use my laptop kind of as a remote viewer. That allows me, especially since I'm doing the manual focus, to really make sure that I'm focused in exactly where I want to be, and then also I'm not shaking the camera when I'm hitting the shutter button. I can hit the shutter button on my laptop, set over to the side, or on a separate surface, even if you've got a wobbly surface, and that will make sure that you don't get that blur from the camera moving ever so slightly. So once I've taken the photo, that's usually it. I don't do a whole lot of photo editing. Might be a little bit of cropping, a little bit of color correction. One thing I forgot to mention is flash. I sometimes use flash to take pictures of the Mini. It kind of depends on the Mini. I'll oftentimes take one with flash, one without, see how I like it, and then decide depending on the background and the particular miniature, which is better. In general, I would say don't use flash, because that's going to oftentimes wash things out. It's going to make the Mini actually look flatter. How I've found it works for me is because I can get these separate lights kind of so bright, and the flash adds a third point of light. And if the ISO and white balance and all of that is adjusted with the flash in mind, that can actually make the picture look much better, much sharper. But in general, I would say don't use the flash, as that will tend to wash out and kind of flatten the photo of the Mini. Minimal editing once I'm done, and then I post it up. I post it and get feedback. So there you go. That's my process for taking the photos of our miniatures. Now, this is the setup that I do when I want to take kind of the photo shoot type pictures of the Mini once they're completely done and I'm really happy with them, and to show those off. But I also take pictures a lot on my phone of Minis that I'm in the process of working on, or that we're out someplace and somebody else is showing me their Mini and I want to get a, I ask them if it's okay, and get pictures of what their Minis look like. And I just shoot those ones on my phone. If you'd be interested in hearing my process and tips for taking pictures of your Minis just using a smartphone, let me know and I'd be happy to do another video on that. So let me know if you use any of these tips, if you've got any additional tips for taking photos of your miniatures. Let's talk about it down below in the comments. Also, if you've got like pictures of your Minis on Twitter and Instagram, make sure to tag us, because I'd love to see some of the work that you folks are doing. I want to give a special thanks to all of our patrons, especially Sean, Joan, Arvi, Lainey, and Bryce. If you're interested in helping us make more videos, maybe pick up a macro lens to do some cooler Mini photos with, and I could do a whole separate video about how to use a macro lens, you can head over to patreon.com/rollforinitiative. Check out the perks that you get from becoming a patron. Alright, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Roll for Initiative. Bye! Sorry about the noise in the background. Kilo is chewing! Stop chewing.